President Trump's America First promise in his campaign is coming in second to the geopolitics of the real world. Tough talk on trade with China hit a wall when it came up against the prospects of a nuclear-armed aggressor. We recently spoke with Peter Morici, who was chief economist at the U.S. International Trade Commission and is now a professor at the University of Maryland. What was President Trump's campaign stance on working with China and his vision of what we ought to do versus what you see happening now?
Well, President Trump promised a very hard line on China and its big trade surplus with the United States, $300 billion a year, at least 2 million American jobs. Since then, he's backed down. What happened was he basically got focused on North Korea, and he swapped trade for North Korea when he didn't need to.
Why do you say he didn't need to?
China is going to do what it needs to do with regard to North Korea out of its own national security interests. To the extent that North Korea is a threat, it will take what steps are necessary. Trump did enough by threatening to act unilaterally if other countries in the region did not assist him to get China to act. He didn't have to throw in trade as well, because the last thing the Chinese want is the Americans going into North Korea, even if it's just bombing and so forth, because they're quite concerned about millions of North Koreans fleeing across the border into China. They want stability in the region. This would upset the equilibrium and so forth.
Former Treasury Secretary Henry Paulson praised China for, quote, stepping up to keep globalization going forward. What do you think of that?
I think Secretary Paulson is wrong. He's behaving like a typical New York investment banker, and that he sees opportunities to make loans and finance the Silk Road and all the rest.
The Silk Road refers to a plan China calls One Belt, One Road, the country's vast investment in shipping and transport to develop a trade route and markets reaching all the way from Malaysia to Europe.
China seems to really be emerging as the global leader in many ways. There was a recent meeting attended by the Philippines, Russia, Turkey, Indonesia, Greece, Hungary, Chile, Argentina. Many of them are getting billions in infrastructure investment from China. What does this say to you?
Well, the Chinese have effectively used the money they've earned on trade to do two things. One is to build up the next level of industries. They're moving into what they call indigenous technologies. Namely, they're going after our high-tech sector. They're not just going to assemble cell phones anymore. They're going to design the next generation of consumer products and sell them here. Then where is Microsoft? And they're turning it into a great foreign policy initiative. You know, Eurasia really does need a modernization of its east-west infrastructure, building better ports, air facilities, railroads, and so forth. And China's in position to finance that. This is the largest capital project since the Marshall Plan.
Never before has one nation carried a greater responsibility for the fate of others in time of peace.
The Marshall Plan was the U.S. initiative to help pay to rebuild Europe after World War II, named for Secretary of State George Marshall.
If we were to go in the direction of America First, would that cause the United States to really lose global market opportunities and fall behind?
If you're going to hardball people, bully smaller rivals and so forth, I think it really weakens American leadership. The only way you can fix the trouble spots in the world is if you have the support of your allies.
What do you think changes because President Trump did not follow through on his promises the way he stated them?
What sadly doesn't change is not a lot changes. We will continue to have a large trade deficit. When it comes down to it, Donald Trump didn't stand up to China. He let down those workers that voted for him. And I think he's going to be a one-term president because of it. And if he is, he's getting everything he deserves. This was his signature issue, and he really shouldn't have backed away from it.
The president has taken at least one stand against China. U.S. warships have tested the Chinese claim to the islands in the South China Sea, sailing within 12 miles to show Beijing that they can't unilaterally claim ownership.